Tennessee, is its most stable since the 1990s or even going before that? Now, when I say stable, I also mean productive. Okay. So, you could have stability with Wade Houston signing a contract and he's in year 2 and he's not going anywhere for 2 more years and he's just not very good. And the basketball program's not very, very good. So combining good and stable, this is the best Tennessee's athletic department has been since when?
I think right now I'm going late 90s, but there's a chance it becomes ever. So late 90s, if you remember, Tennessee had Rod Delmonico in his prime running the baseball program, just like they have Tony Vitello now, who I think is doing a better job than Rod Delmonico did. They had Pat Summitt. Stability, that's stability on its own in production.
Right.
Summitt. And they had Philip Fulmer running the football program. There was a period when Jerry Green was there with the basketball program, and it was a 4-year period, but it was 4 productive years. Now, the issue is, obviously, Jerry Green, that was the oddball out because he was the one coach that, even though the program was productive, no one really wanted to give Jerry Green credit for the productivity of that program. And maybe based on the stories you told me, they probably shouldn't have been giving Jerry Green credit for the productivity of the program.
No. So let me take, okay, I'm going to take the Pearl era. Okay. And I'm defining it by basketball, but I will take Bruce Pearl was coach at Tennessee from what years?
05 to 11.
Gosh, I really can't take that because the football program was in trouble. So
that first year he was there was the first year the football program missed out on a bowl game.
And I'm not giving it to Jerry Green because, I mean, he goes and the baseball program wasn't great, but Jerry Green goes on ball calls and calls out the administration. That's not a stable athletic department.
That was at the end, though. I'm talking late 90s. I'm talking, okay, let's not forget there was a moment, 1998, Tennessee wins the national championship in football. They're defending 3-time national champs in women's basketball, and they're top 10 in men's basketball.
Okay, well, let me just ask you this. If I told you that on a road game, the team bus had to pull over to a liquor store, would you tell me that's a stable basketball program?
I would not. Did that happen?
I'm not saying that it definitely did happen, but I'm saying it definitely may have happened. That's the best way that I can. Okay, it definitely may have happened.
I mean, look,
definitely probably happened.
I was an outsider at the time, so just for context, I was 11 and 12. Like my first foray into college athletics was following Tennessee football, but it was actually following Memphis Tiger basketball, which was a common thing for those people who grew up in Memphis. I didn't understand because I was obviously away from the program why there was so much hate for Jerry Green with Tennessee being, and it was before that last year I realized that. Now that I've learned and done more research, I realize that the dislike for Jerry Green goes back for from the time he took the job. It sounds like that was a scrambled hire to begin with.
Yes, it very much was. They had Kevin Stallings, and I've told you that story, but they blew the Kevin Stallings hire. I think it's the most stable ever in my lifetime. And by my lifetime, I'm including, I was born in 74. So I've done research in the 70s. I'm not as good as Caleb is going back and doing research. He does like in the 50s, 40s and beyond. But I think it's as stable as ever. And I say that because you had Rick Mears, who had Ernie and Bernie in the 70s. Or Ray Mears. Rick Mears is a race car driver. Ray Mears, you had Ray Mears, who had Ernie and Bernie. But let's be frank. I mean, he ended up getting sideways with the university. It was almost like they were better by default. And
the football program was a disaster during that time.
The football program was a disaster. I'm not going to give it to Jerry Green just because of the success. I believe that, he benefited a lot from uber talent. Yeah. I mean, I think in my lifetime, 70s, 80s, 90s, 10s or 2000s, 10s, yes, it's the most stable in 50 years. It's the most stable in a half a century. I don't think there's really any argument to be had for that. I mean, we can gripe about Kellie Harper just making the Sweet 16. We can gripe about Rick Barnes just making the Sweet 16. That's still the Sweet 16. That ain't bad. The football team seems very stable with a coach that wants to hang around, and that can be unusual. You don't think that Alabama fans each and every year wonder if this is Nick Saban's final year? They do. You don't think that other coaches or other programs worry if their coaches are going to get poached? They do. The exception would be Kirby Smart at Georgia because he played there. But you have a coach that seemingly really, really wants to be at Tennessee, a football coach, and that's the most important thing. And then everything falls in after that, Caleb, and it falls in place quite well. You're making the Sweet 16. And yeah, I think this is the most stable Tennessee's program has been in since I've been alive, since 1970.
I mean, I would definitely entertain most stable. I mean, I would definitely entertain that idea.
Combined with successful.
Right. Stability and success. It's still a little hard because, yes, you take points away from Jerry Green. Would I take this Tennessee basketball era over the Jerry Green era? Easily. Not even thinking about it. Not even a question.
See, now when you phrase it like that, that's weird because that team was so entertaining and talented and fun.
Yeah, but 5 straight NCAA tournaments and 2 Sweet 16s versus 4 NCAA tournaments and 1 Sweet 16 and an SEC tournament title in Rick Barnes' name, an SEC regular season title in Rick Barnes' name, but a period at number 1, 30-plus win season.
But they were just so – I agree with everything you said, but they were just so fun.
I get it, but like, okay, I'm saying, but if you compare the where you might give the edge to the late 90s, though, is football and women's basketball were so productive during that time, more than now. I mean, you're talking, again, women's basketball was coming off the greatest season in the history of the sport with the 3 Meeks, and football was winning the national title, going 13-0. So that's where, but I'm with you. And Rod Delmonico was, again, he was stable with baseball. They would make the College World Series every 4 years.
Yeah, but again, you combine that with success. They didn't care. They didn't care about Rod Delmonico. They didn't care that Tennessee's baseball program was languishing and was at best going to be a College World Series team, once every 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, it was right about then.
I mean, now if Tony Vitello starts turning in a once every 5 or 6 years program that makes the College World Series, there's a problem. Right?
No, that's true. That's a good point.
I mean, that was back in the days where they held spring camp and preseason, or not spring camp, but they held preseason football practice in the outfield of the baseball field. I mean, that tells you what they thought about baseball right then.
Yeah.
I mean, they would tear the outfield just totally apart and have to resod it.
Dave, let's reverse this because you were there during the worst. Let's pick the year when Tennessee was at its least stable. And I got a year in mind, and I don't know if we have the same year, but a calendar year.
Well, I guess I would have to say 2010 with having to go after Dooley because everybody else said no.
I'd say 2011, but you're close with 2010. Because I think the whole Dooley period was unstable because he was not wanted and the program was on fire and he didn't help matters. But 2011 was the NCAA investigation. It was the year, tragically, Pat Summitt revealed her dementia diagnosis. It was the year they had to fire Bruce Pearl because of the scandal. And it was the year Mike Hamilton was basically forced aside. That all happened in 2011. Oh, and Derek Dooley lost to Kentucky that year.
I always wonder if Tennessee would have been better off if Mike Hamilton would have stayed.
I think Mike Hamilton made some critical errors.
Well, he made some that I can't even share, but I do think he was very insightful with the Lane Kiffin hire. I thought that was outside the box. He was in basketball circles, so he made the Bruce Pearl hire. Smoky Mountain Red says, Dave, I would have hired you over Dooley. Thank you.
But fantastic job. And look, I want to say this up front. I thought he got an unfair shake when he was at Tennessee. I understand why, but Quanzo Martin dealt with so much when he was at Tennessee. The 3 years he was there, that still wasn't a good hire. Mike Hamilton admitted later that he would have hired Rick Byrd, and he said, I just couldn't envision Rick Byrd not coaching at Belmont. I didn't want to see it. I'm like, you're the athletic director at another school. You shouldn't think like that.
I didn't hear that. The bottom line is, though, whether or not he was great in an administrative role and whether or not he was great at hiring basketball coaches, you are defined by what happens to the football program. And the moment that Lane Kiffin decided to bolt, it was over. I mean, because they took the power from him. I still remember it was a Friday afternoon, and this Dooley guy came out of nowhere. We got a tip that it was Dooley, and we were so blindsided by it that we didn't even run it because we just didn't believe it. And sure enough, they had decided on Dooley when they still had hires to make, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
interviews to make.